If you'd like to support my guitar building YouTube channel, visit eguitarplans.com and buy a plan. A link is in the description below. Now on with the video. Hey guys, it's Chris at Highline Guitars and you're watching another episode of From the Luthier's Workbench. In this episode I'll be covering part 4 of the oak butcher block kitchen tabletop guitar build. And what I'll be talking about specifically is I'm going to be drilling holes for the tuners. I'm going to do a last bit of sanding. Then I'll apply some finish, and finally I'll press in the frets to the fretboard. So let's stop John and start sawing. It's way faster to drill the tuner holes with my drill press than it is to use my CNC machine. So I'll mark the position of the holes using a printout from the plan that I drew for this guitar. I'll be using a 3/8 inch diameter brad point drill bit, which are specifically made for drilling through wood. And what I'll do is I'll drill almost all the way through so that just the tip of the brad point is popping through the other side. Then I'll flip the headstock over and finish drilling the hole. This allows me to get a nice clean hole drilled without any risk of chip out. Next, I'm going to fine tune the radius on a radius sanding block using some 240 grit sandpaper. Then I'll grab my random orbital sander and some 220 grit sandpaper and start fine tuning the back contour of the neck. And as I'm sanding, every so often I'll stop to check the thickness of the neck to make sure it's within the specifications that I'm after. And I'll use a digital caliper to check that, and I'll check it at the 1st fret and then again at the 12th fret. And once I'm satisfied I have the surface smooth and I'm at the specifications I want, the sanding is basically finished. Before I start to apply the finish, I like to wipe down the surface with some mineral spirits. This will darken the wood while it's wet, and it helps me to see any scratches that might otherwise escape detection. I usually always test my finishes on scrap wood, and what I did here is I did a test with several different kinds of stains, and I ended up selecting some Varathane golden oak, which I thought looked pretty nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply that using a clean paper towel, and as you can see here, it darkens the wood quite significantly. But what I'm really after here is to use this stain to make the grain in the oak pop out. And before I can go any further, I have to hang it up and let it dry overnight. The next day, I started wet sanding the entire surface of the neck and fretboard using mineral spirits as a lubricant, and I started with some P500 grit wet dry sandpaper, and I'll completely sand the surface. And what this is going to do is it's going to remove some of the dark color from the very surface of the wood while leaving it in the pores and the grain. It'll also work up some sanding dust, which will pack down into the grain and help to create a nice smooth surface. After I've finished with the 500 grit, I'll switch over and start sanding with P800 grit to get it even smoother, and then I'll probably finish with a P1500 grit, and that'll give it a really nice silky smooth feel. Of course, wet sanding oil finish is going to fill the fret slots with some gunk. So I found that one of these StewMac fret slot cleaning tools does a great job of getting the gunk out of there. And now I'm going to seal the wood by making a 50-50 mix of mineral spirits and boiled linseed oil, which I will wipe onto the surface. Of course, when dealing with oily rags, gloves, and sandpaper, you've got to lay them out and let them dry for a couple of days to reduce the potential for a fire. After letting that mixture of boiled linseed oil and mineral spirits dry for a couple of days, I came back and wet sanded a mix that was 70% mineral spirits and 30% boiled linseed oil. This will further seal the wood, and by using a P1500 grit sandpaper for the wet sanding, it'll give it that really silky smooth feel that guitar players love to feel on the back of their guitar necks. And then once the sanding is finished, I'll wipe the surface down with a clean paper towel just to ensure that there aren't going to be any streaks that dry in the wood. Of course, it will need at least a few days to fully dry, so I'll hang it up and leave it alone. And after the oil had dried, it was time to start installing the frets. And here I'm cutting to size strips of, this is a medium height stainless steel fret wire from Jescar. And I'll just cut these down as close as I can to the width of the fretboard, just to save myself a little bit of time. Next, I'll grab my fret tang nipper and nip off just the ends of the tang, because the fret slots in my guitar neck stop short of reaching the side. So by nipping off that little bit of tang at the ends, I can press the frets in without any issue. Even though these nippers make short work of clipping off that tang, I still need to use a file to get the last little nub of the tang off the bottom of the crown. Since I'm going to be flooding the slots with CA glue, to protect the surface of the fretboard, I'll smear some Minwax paste finishing wax over each slot, and that will keep the glue from spreading out onto the surface, which can be very difficult to remove. And then I'm going to apply thin CA glue into the slot using a stainless steel angled pipette. Then I can press the fret into the slot with my fingers and then use the arbor press to further press it all the way down into the slot. And it'll take about 10 minutes for that glue to fully cure, and it'll fill all the gaps between the tang as well as the bottom of the fret slot. So that will help to prevent the dreaded dead fret. And once I'm finished, I can wipe off that paste furniture wax with a cloth dampened with either naphtha or mineral spirits. And then I'll grab my fret cutter and snip off any residual pieces of fret wire that might be overhanging the edge. Now I can put a bevel on the frets using a file which I attached to a slab of rosewood which I had cut a slot into. It's a great tool and it's easy to make. Now, if by chance I had slopped any CA glue onto the neck, I can just use some debonder to wipe it off. The neck is basically finished, so I can set this aside and start working on the guitar body. And that's what I'm going to be doing in the next episode. So until then, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.